Hi, I'm Jake.
And I'm Phoebe.
And here at Foxy Home Staging, we help you sell your home faster, for top dollar and without the stress.
We've staged thousands of homes and worked with some of Brisbane's best agents. We've worked out exactly how to make your home be presented perfectly to make buyers fall in love.
Today we're breaking down what separates a great home stager from one that's maybe not so great, and how to get the most from your money when you're hiring a stager. Now, if you're in Brisbane or the Gold Coast, lucky you, just call us and be done with it, make it easy. But for the lot of you who won't be in Brisbane or Gold Coast, here's a few things that we need to think about when you're looking for a home stager.
That sounds far more salesy than what we would normally do. But we honestly, I've had that connection. We've spoken to so many different agents. We've worked with over 1,000 different agents across, actually it's much higher than that, across Brisbane and the Gold Coast in the 9 years we've been operational. So we do have a bit of knowledge when it comes to what you should be asking your stylist and what you should consider when you're engaging one. So today we're going to go through a couple of key questions that we think are really important to consider. Some things that you might not have thought about, because if it's the first time you've sold a home, then why on earth would you have had to think about it previously? But they're important questions, and I would hate for you to find them out at the end of a hire agreement as to why it's important to know the information. Well, let's just go through. We've got 5 important points. I know what you're going to say. You're going to talk about whether or not they're in stock.
Yeah, I think, so to me, when we talk about the questions, there's a couple of questions depending on who you're talking to as well. So the first question, I guess, is to ask yourself before you even get to that point, so that you know how to separate the stages, is whether the company that you're looking at, or the companies, whether they own their own stock, whether they have their own warehouse, inventory and styling team in particular. And then I would put almost a similar question attached to the same sort of set of questions, is do they have their own logistics team in-house as well, which is probably a minor note, but something worth thinking about.
Yep. So in Queensland, I think most homeowners don't know this, but it's also similar across all different industries. It's not specific to home staging. In Queensland, there are 2 different business models. You can either own your own inventory and have your team in-house, or you can hire your inventory and outsource your logistics. Now, the difference between the two, outsourced and hired stock, comes with a middleman price.
Exactly. So you don't, if that's the business model that the stage you're looking at is using, they don't have full control over the stock that they're going to get each day, the timing of when it will be available, not necessarily have control over the quality, depending on where they're getting it from, but the most important part you touched on, the price. If I'm a staging company that hires furniture, I'm dictated to, by the company I'm hiring from, what my minimum price needs to be before I even think about other things like logistics or putting a margin to make a profit. So there's a lot less control or flexibility on those things.
Yeah, so I think that's why I brought that up as number 1, because pricing is obviously a significant component, and budget does dictate quite a lot of the conversation when it comes to how to market your property effectively. Now, if we lead that into our number 2, what happens if my home doesn't sell?
So from that point of view, if it doesn't sell, then you're asking questions about how long was the hire period potentially. So there can be a difference between staging companies on how long they'll leave the furniture in for. But more importantly, the extension and extension rates, periods, essentially the cost around that if we need to leave it in for longer. Again, it kind of relates to that first question, because those companies that own their own stock have more flexibility around this. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to do it for free. There's going to be a cost involved in that. But there can be a little bit of flexibility around maybe the timing, or, we can do it on a Friday instead of a Monday, giving you the rest of the week for open homes, inspections. But at the end of the day, if we go with that first, or the business model where we're hiring furniture, that company has to charge a price because they're getting charged a price.
Yeah. And then hired homes, obviously. So not just the extension period. Do they do a 1-week extension? Do they do a 4-week extension? Can they offer a better price for a prolonged extension? All of those rates should be transparent. They should have full transparency in those rates prior to you signing up and accepting a quotation. They shouldn't be hidden behind anything, and they should definitely be, I would suggest, signed off in some terms and agreements prior to the furniture arriving to your property, so that you know what to expect. You touched on it, the higher length of furniture. Yes. There's also a difference in that.
There is. It's probably less to do with the business model in this case. It's more a question that you should ask your stager, especially if you're getting multiple quotes and you want to compare the two. Many will do it on, say, a 6-week hire period, and others will do it on an 8 or something in between, or even outside of that. There's some pretty common It's either 6 or 8 is kind of the most common, but it's definitely worth asking that question so that you know what you're kind of paying for.
Yeah. All right, number 3. Our philosophy at Foxy is that we feel that everybody should have the opportunity to style their home. It doesn't matter if you're living in the home or if it's going to be a vacant, if it's a brand new build versus you're downsizing a family home you've been living in for 35 years. So our philosophy is everyone should have the opportunity. So that leads us into the question of, do you style the home I'm living in?
And the reason you even ask this question is because you might rule out a couple of staging companies or staging options right off the bat, because some of them just say no to that sort of work. Many will only do vacant homes, some will have a harder time as well if it's not their specialty or it's not something they've been doing for a while. The more difficult properties from a styling point of view are usually those an integrated or something where somebody's living there. So if a company doesn't have that experience, maybe that's worth knowing up front as well.
I think there's also a thought process there that if I'm using some of your furniture, well, the pricing should be more effective. There should be a cheaper option because I don't have to bring as much as the furniture. And I think a really good conversation to have with a stylist, and one that we know all too well, is the styling in what we call, when you're living in your home, it's called integrated styling. Now, when we're doing that actually takes more work for our team. We need more hands on site. It needs to be more cohesive in what we're thinking about than actually bringing in a full vacant property. So the pricing related conversation when it comes to an integrated styling is a little bit opposite to what you would be considering. And it would be a good conversation to have with your stylist if they do offer it as an option. Okay, so now if we lead into what I think is a really important conversation, all about expectation setting. Can I have say in what the styling looks like?
Or a different version of that same question is, what if I didn't like it, or if I didn't understand it, or some version of that. The styling's been done and I have questions about it.
Yeah.
And this is probably one of those questions where you should ask it. The answer's going to probably be similar for most companies, and it's not until after the fact that you will find out whether it's actually the same or not.
Yeah.
But the reality is there might be times where you don't understand or you didn't like something in particular. You need to understand what the process will be to either fix that, what the conversation will be. Will they fix that? Because some companies will not, and will stand behind their terms and conditions and say, it's our styling, so it is what it is. And other companies, like we're on the other end of that spectrum, where we'll have a conversation. We want you to love it as much as we do, and if there's something where we have done it in a particular way, we want the chance to explain that. So it's important, if you're looking for a stager, to understand what will that process be.
So the questions to ask to know where your expectations can lie at the very start, at the consultation. Now, we have clients ask us for a mood board. Now, we don't do mood boards. Mood boards are incredibly time consuming, and for something that needs to be based on the availability of stock at the time, it's not a practical solution for us to give you a mood board to show you what we're going to be styling with. Now, instead, ask for examples of links to properties that they have recently styled. Ask for examples of links to realestate.com so you can see properties that are similar to yours. We have had clients who have asked ones that they can literally go and do a walkthrough at an open home in the coming weekend. They're all options to you. You can see, touch and feel the quality and the amount of styling that someone will bring in. And that will give you a really great understanding if the company who you've had quote are going to do a quality job. You then, the next step from that, can say, look, I believe my home could do with X, Y, Z. I think it's coastal. I would love to see some blue in there. Now, if the company can deliver on that, they will let you know. If they can't and they think that's not going to work best, so I've walked into a 90s or a 70s brick home and I've been asked to do modern luxury Hamptons. Those things aren't going to work together, and we're really, really honest and upfront about it. If we style a home for what it needs, and I set those expectations at the start, because if I go and set it as a luxury Hamptons, your home isn't going to get the best, you're not going to get the best money for it because we've missed the mark completely. So it's about those conversations. Let them know if you'd like something, let them know if you don't want to see something, and then you can work together from there.
And I guess just to add one last thing on that is having that conversation when it's with Foxy in the way you've just described, it is open and it's about communication.
Yeah.
Some companies asking that question will let you know how their process, because there will be some that don't want that conversation as well, which is why it's an important conversation or question to ask up front, so that you know the relationship that you're going to be able to have with the stager and what input you can have, if any.
I think for us, we're a reputational based business. A referral isn't going to happen if you don't love it as much as we do. And it doesn't necessarily mean changing an end outcome to show you that to do exactly what you've asked, but it could mean having a conversation to explain why the dining chairs are facing the outdoor furniture is facing inwards and not outwards, why we've gone with a mirror over artwork, why we've used this style or color. And once we've had that conversation, you know you've been heard, that can go a really, really long way. But I think that relationship doesn't happen at the very start, but you do need to set those expectations. All right, pricing transparency, hidden costs.
I think this is one of those questions where you're not really probably sure what to ask, other than you know that maybe it's something you should.
Yep.
So I guess firstly you can do a bit of a search and ask what are the total costs. You can ask the staging company, is it upfront and that's all? So it's about understanding or knowing, is this all I'm up for? Is there, like I said before, the different business models might mean different costs. So I know some companies will charge the delivery, the logistics component separately, whereas most will probably include it in the upfront cost as well. Even payment options, when we talk about pricing and other costs, I think it's worth asking what are the payment options, if any. Is there, some companies will do only upfront, paid a week before and that's it, and there's no wiggle room on that. Others will do a maybe deposit and a pay later portion. All of those things are worth understanding so that you understand what those requirements are going to be and if there's any flexibility in that.
Yep. We quote GST inclusive, and I think as a stock standard run like an everyday person, that's not really a question that you're going to think about asking, and the quote should define whether or not it's GST inclusive or not. And I know, being quoted painting, other things before, I've been called out on that, so just make sure your prices, if you clarify that. In different states, there are different options as add-ons that you can have to your styling. Do you want fresh florals? Do you want a styling team to go and refresh the property in between the open homes weekly? Those are the sorts of things that will come with an additional fee. But that should be very obvious and listed as a very obvious line in the quotation. We've had styling companies ask us before, do we charge for our collection of the furniture separately? So we are a one price, fully inclusive type situation, but if it doesn't lay out on the quotation what it includes, and if it doesn't say installation and collection, then obviously there's a question that I think needs to be asked to make sure that you're not going to get a second invoice when the furniture is collected, which obviously needs to happen.
I think as well, going back to the last question, there's a tie in there where if there's something that needs changing, if I'm not 100% happy, if I need to, whatever it is, if there's a change that needs to be happened up front, is there another delivery fee? Is there things like cancellation fees, because maybe it's a property where you're getting other works done, painting, carpet, whatever, and if there's a delay in the painting and you've locked in your staging and I have to delay, is there a cost there?
Yeah.
Most companies will include something like that in their terms and conditions. I know we do, and yet I don't think we've ever once used it, or it's very, very rare, but it's worth asking the question, especially if that's your situation where you foresee there's a chance in some sort of delay.
Or an off-market sale.
Yeah.
So that, basically where our view on is if the truck has been loaded, if we've done work which is within 24 hours of the install happening, then that's when a fee should be charged. We get that notice before that point, so that doesn't happen very often for us. But again, that should be in terms and conditions, and you should see it before you sign on and actually have the job happening. All right, last one. I think this is outside of what I said is 5. My agent has said that I don't need styling, my house will sell as is. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the question then in this case is going to go back to the agent. What is their relationship with staging? I guess that's a weird way to put it, but is this an agent who doesn't stage any of their properties? And if that's the case, maybe there's another opinion on staging with that agent, or do they stage a lot of the properties and they're legitimately saying this one doesn't need it? Because we've gone into houses, we've done consultations of properties where there's almost no advice we can give, right? It happens. The person is, the property is beautiful, it's set up already with the furniture, it's ready to go. I think it's not probably a question that you can ask the agent directly very easily and get an open conversation about why, but I would still ask the question to try and understand what is it that's making you say that about my property.
So I would say the situation when we walked in, it's absolutely perfect. That happens less frequently than probably walking to a property that is vacant and their agent said, nah, this one will move pretty quickly, you don't need to have this done.
I think that's the most common is, this will sell anyway.
Yeah, and that for me raises some questions. And you say relationship with staging, I would say the confidence in the selling process, because it's a difficult conversation for an agent sometimes to have if they haven't had it a lot, to suggest spending the extra money on marketing. And the fact that you've got an agent through, a styling company through, to come and quote on a property after someone has told you that you don't need, and you know the value that it can bring, good on you. I would love the stories. I would love to hear them, to know the difference when an agent has told you not to do it versus have you actually gone with that agent in the end versus what was the end outcome of the job. Because I know hands down a vacant property that it will sell better with styling it every day of the week, and it is a hard conversation for some agents to have as they build the confidence to ask you to spend the more money, because the risk is that they lose your business, and that is a big, in some, especially in regional towns, that is a really big, hard conversation. So I think
we see the results every day, so we're obviously on this side of the table, and we're certainly biased when it comes to the results that staging can bring. But the reality is, if that's what the agent is saying, knowing what we know about it, the question needs to be asked of yourself: is this the agent for me? And actually going down the path of understanding, like I said, why are they saying that?
Yep.
Because you're potentially leaving a lot of value on the table without going down that path. So ask, is this the right person, and other options out there.
We hope we've been helpful. Wish you the very best in the sale of your home. Always open to having questions asked, but I think the industry itself, I would say the stylists who you're having through and who you're interviewing, they themselves would be open to the same conversations.